everyone. Welcome to Business English and Soft Skills. Tonight we are talking all about leadership. I'm Ariella. I'm an American English teacher living in Algeria, and I'm the founder and CEO of the American Institute, which is an English school in Algiers. The program tonight, this is part of a 6-week course all about business English. We meet together every Wednesday night at 6:30 or 6:40 if the internet is not cooperating, and talk about things related to business English. Really, we're looking at language, vocabulary, cultural elements that can help you better navigate professional environments and your careers in English, if that is where your career is taking you. So tonight is session 4. We are here on June 5th. We are talking about leadership and management in business English. We have 2 more weeks after this. I was going to say, is one of these weeks Eid? Oh no, we're I think we should be set June 5th, June. Well, I'll look at the calendar later, but the point is we have 2 more weeks coming up. Course rules, stay appropriate in the chat, stay on topic, and please participate. If you haven't said hi yet in the chat, please say hi, introduce yourself. I'm excited to engage with you tonight. We have written participation. The word I'm looking for is participation, as well as spoken. So I'm hoping to get some of you on the microphone. So please introduce yourself. Let me know a little bit about you in the chat. Maybe what city you're in right now, or maybe if you're working, if you have a job, what that job is. I see Amar looking for the missing videos. Yes, my team is on it to put all the videos online. I think we have all the medical videos online, but not yet business videos. So thank you so much for your patience. They will be on YouTube shortly. And actually on the next page, I don't have the YouTube. Let me put it in the chat so you can see exactly what channel to find it on. Institute-DZ Institute. Oh, I'm not spelling this correctly. Okay, good. All right. I see we have students with us, law students. Amazing. Constantine, Algiers, we have a doctor studying accounting. Wonderful. Welcome, welcome. I love seeing who's in the virtual room with me. Business students, French students. Great. Welcome, everybody. I want you to notice when you send your messages, if you want them to go to everybody in the chat, you need to make sure that the little blue button next to the word to says everyone, or else it's just coming to me and I get to see it, and I can always read those out loud as well. But I see some people sending to the hosts. Corporate relationship manager, welcome. INC engineer, INC. I'm not even sure what INC is. Technical sales engineer. Great. Substitute teacher in chemistry. Oh my gosh, very fascinating. Some highly skilled individuals here with me tonight. Happy to have you. Welcome. Great. I see, Hisham, you're describing yourself as having a master's degree in money and banking. I love this because in English, it sounds a little funny to say you have a master's degree in money, but it's funny, like maybe you're doing it on purpose to make a joke about when you study, probably you studied either accounting, banking, economics, statistics, one of these things. But to say I have a master's degree in money, it's kind of like people who say, I have a master's degree in love. You know, you're sort of just like describing a characteristic, like I'm someone who knows how to make money. So in a business context, it's not the correct language, but in a funny context, it could really work. All right, PhD student, architect. Thank you, Walid. Instrument and control. Okay, INC stands for instrument and control. Welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. So tonight we're talking about leadership, and I want you to tell me, to you, what is leadership? Tell me in the chat. What do you consider leadership? Is leadership something you admire? Does leadership mean extroversion? Does leadership mean responsibility? When you hear the word leadership, what do you think of? Leading and organizing a team, an art to make others do what you want. Interesting. Any other ideas? To be the way to your collaborators. I think, Amar, you're reaching for to lead the way for collaborators, to show the way, managing a team, leadership as a mindset. Interesting. I like this concept. The ability to motivate people, motivating your team to give their best, managing and motivating, lead and managing. Good. So we're getting a couple different vocab words in here: motivating, leading, managing, role models. Awesome. Here's a very basic breakdown that is very, very simplified, because what a leader is to me might not be what a leader is to you, or what good leadership looks like to me might not be exactly what good leadership looks like to you. But there are a few foundational things we can agree on. So what I've put here tonight is that leadership, put bluntly or put simply, is really an ability to influence and guide others towards a common goal or a common vision. So you're going to find leaders in companies where the common goal maybe is to increase your sales, to increase your revenue, to increase profit. Maybe you have a leader in a university where the goals are to enhance the quality of education, to produce high quality research. With a common goal, the leader is the one who guides a group of people towards achieving it. We have inspiring and motivating people to achieve their best, often by setting an example. We have providing direction, letting people know which way we are leading, and fostering a supportive and collaborative environment. These are sort of general things that we can agree upon. Leaders are involved in these activities in order to guide a group of people to reach their final goal. I have a question here in the chat. Are we just participating in the chat? So I think it's Kais who sent the question. Thank you for the question. For the webinar style, I don't see your faces. We don't have a meeting style call where you're participating on video with me. However, there are questions that I have where I will invite you to participate on audio. I call it coming on mic, and you raise your hand and I select you and you can come on mic. And there are some questions where you get to come on the microphone. So I'm very excited to get to those at the end. But for now, please answer in the chat and I'll read aloud the answers and discuss them. Great. Tell me, who are leaders who inspire you? Who are some leaders who inspire you? Please tell me in the chat. Write to me a leader who inspires you and tell me why. It doesn't need to be a long answer. It doesn't need to be, full sentences. Just send me some thoughts on leaders that inspire you and then tell me why. So Hisham says, Andrew Tate. Okay, why? Why is Andrew Tate a leader who inspires you? Elon Musk. Why? Another Andrew Tate. Okay, tell me why. What about their leadership inspires you? What do they do that connects with you, that makes you feel like you are working with them towards a goal? They're leading you towards a goal. Thank you, Yassine. That's very nice of you. Yassine writes, Ariella Knight for her professionalism and enthusiasm. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Self-made. Interesting. So we are inspired by leaders who have started with very little. And we feel, we believe that it's their own, whether it's intelligence or people skills or belief in themselves, but through something inherent in them, they have achieved the role that they have. And that can be very inspiring. That can lead us to do the same. Confidence, absolutely. Steve Jobs, okay. There's a Algerian businesswoman named Dunya Z. She inspires me because she makes me realize that nothing is impossible to achieve, especially as a woman. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that story. Wordada says, everyone who's successful in my field of interest. It's an interesting point, Wordada, because I do have a follow-up question, which is a successful person always, I won't say a good leader, I'll say a leader in general? Is there a difference? Are leaders just simply people who have become successful? Or is a leader a successful person who also leads? And I asked the question not exactly having an answer myself, but it's something that I am interested by. How do we see, what's the difference between an icon who we look up to, someone who inspires us, let's say a celebrity, let's say I'm super into Madonna. Madonna really inspires me. I don't necessarily consider Madonna a leader, not for me, not for things I'm interested in. I'm not following her in a common goal towards making art, making music. Maybe if I was a singer, I would see her as someone providing leadership that I'm connected to. Instead, I just simply like her music. And when I think about leadership and leaders, I'm really thinking more about people who work in my field or people who I connect with on how I want to grow as a professional. Okay. Let's see what you have added. We have Barack Obama. We have Stephen Bartlett. Stephen Bartlett, I don't know who that one is. Bill Gates. The leader that leads the way rather than ordering from a distance. I like that. So leads the way, meaning they're in front. So when the team moves forward, the leader's not in the back shouting directions. They're at the front. My uncle was one of the pioneers who brought maxillofacial surgery in Algeria. Awesome. That's a great person to look up to as a leader. All right. Let's continue. I wanted to just really get us in the mindset of who are we talking about? When we talk about leadership, who comes to mind? Let's just orient ourselves in this world of leaders and people who inspire us as we look at some of the business English vocabulary around leadership. Uh-oh. My slides are refusing to move. Well, while we wait, let me see, because I have two other good answers here. So these are folks answering my question about, is a successful person necessarily a leader, which again, I don't have an answer to, but I'm just curious. It's something I think about. It's something I chew over or chew on, meaning an idea that I continue to think about in my head. So Heba says you can be a good leader and not be successful in the way society describes success, but still be able to influence, lead, and manage a team. It's a great point, Heba. That's a really great point, because I actually, now that I listen back to what I was saying, I said, if you're successful, you're not necessarily a leader. But if you're a leader, it means you've been successful. But it's a good point. What does that mean, be successful? If we're just talking about the external viewpoint or the external sort of like winning prizes, the Nobel Prize, or winning certificates, or getting recognition, that actually excludes a lot of people who are providing amazing leadership, maybe in the comfort of their own home. That's a really good point. So you might be a good leader who's not so successful in the external sense, but still be able to influence, lead, and manage a team. Great. Where it says, I guess both everyone who's successful is a leader in his profession. For example, a successful teacher is a leader for students. I agree with this. Yes, I agree. They say, be a leader instead of a boss, says Waleed. Yeah, actually, we're going to come to that. That's later in the presentation as well. What are some key elements of leadership? So meaning characteristics or responsibilities. What do you need to have in order to be a strong and effective leader? Confidence, great. Cleverness, communication, the ability to communicate, hardworking, passion, intelligence. Give me some more. What else do we need? Oh, active listening. I like that one. That's a unique one. And I think should not be unique because it's extremely important. Vision, Abdul Qadir, beautiful. I love that. Vision. A leader actually has to have a vision where they are bringing the team. Ambition, knowledge. Yeah, at a very basic level, the leader has to have the information required to inspire, to lead, to be worthy of that position. Understanding all types of personalities. Having good relationships with people, people skills, trust, motivating the team, solution-oriented, mindset, interesting, making good decisions, not being someone who thinks like others, having your own way. We see leaders as sometimes brilliant in that they look at a problem and they have a solution different from 99% of other people. Interesting. Wise, discipline, having ways to influence people. They have self-guidance, so they're able to guide themselves. They take responsibility, objective, positive vision, helpful, generous, amazing. Thank you for these. As I said at the beginning, what is an effective leader to one person may not be an effective leader to another person. So thinking about things like people skills. Of course, having strong people skills or collaborative teamwork skills are going to be critical for any leader. What that looks like for one person, maybe someone wants someone who's really focused on conflict resolution, on listening, on bonding with the team, whereas another another leader might be really focused on challenging, getting to know the team members so that they can push them, they can encourage them to move outside their comfort zones. You might be saying to me, hey, Ariella, a good leader does all of these things. In an ideal world, a leader will have every single positive characteristic we want them to have. But in reality, leaders are people, just like me and you, and perhaps you yourself are also a leader, meaning that you will have certain communication style that other leaders won't have, and that uniqueness will draw people to you and draw people to your specific leadership style that won't necessarily draw them to another leader. So we can create sort of our bucket list of characteristics that we would love to see, but it's really interesting to think about ourselves as a leader. You know, maybe I'm not going to be the extrovert, talking with everyone, making everyone comfortable, relaxed. Maybe that's not my leadership style. That doesn't mean I can't also be a good leader. Great. Here are some key elements of leadership that we put in the presentation. So visionary thinking, which is why I really liked when Abdul Qadir put vision, because leadership, and these are I would say, they're not personal to me. A lot of people share these, but this list is not exhaustive. So you may have characteristics that you think should be mentioned as number one for a leader. You may order or prioritize characteristics differently, and that's completely fine. Visionary thinking. Visionary thinking is someone who sees beyond the now, sees beyond today. They are faced, let's say, with a problem. We have an example of someone talking about a teacher at school. So a really good teacher becomes a leader. They lead the students. Maybe they lead newer teachers who are new to the profession. Maybe they lead all the teachers in just someone who helps organize events, or if teachers are frustrated, upset, it's this person who brings it to the administration. So a visionary thinker is someone who sees a problem and doesn't just address the immediate problem in front of them. They anticipate about problems arriving, similar to this one, maybe in 2 years, in 3 years, and they envision new solutions. Okay, what can we do to change the entire process so that this entire issue doesn't happen in the future? Strategic decision making. So when we talk about leaders, we are usually talking about strategy. We're talking about someone who is moving, as we said, moving a group towards a common goal, meaning they have to have a belief about how to get to that goal. I believe the best way to work as a team is to meet every morning, touch base, not talk all day, don't have any more meetings, and we meet every day. So we keep our days free. If we need each other, we text each other, but otherwise it's independent work time. That's an example. That's one leader I'm imagining, maybe in a corporate environment, who says, I'm anti-meeting, or I want to limit how people collaborate because I think it's counterproductive. And it also requires decision-making, the ability to make choices, because a leader has to decide when we come to a fork in the road. Are we going left or are we going right? They cannot sit and look around and ask someone else to make the decisions for them. Effective communication. So a leader is a guide. It means inherently you're working with people. So when I think of successful people who I wouldn't identify as leaders, a lot of the ones I'm thinking about are scientists who are used to working alone, or who are used to being the genius in the room. So maybe everyone else has to work around them. Everyone else has to figure out how to communicate in their style. Oh, maybe it's Stephen Hawking. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Stephen Hawking is a leader. Maybe he was a great leader of the team. But you can imagine someone who's so brilliant that they are surrounded by assistants. and the assistants are around that person in order to facilitate life for them. So they are assisting the person, maybe the person in charge or the genius on staff, and they are, whether it's explicitly said to them or it's implicitly understood, they are the ones responsible for figuring out a way to effectively communicate. For me, a strong leader meets their team where they're at. So, in this case, if we're imagining I'm the leader, let's pick Bill Gates from the list. If I'm Bill Gates and I want to be a true leader, I have my team around me. I have my, director of marketing. I have my director of sales, my director of technology, let's say. I don't know why I picked Bill Gates because I don't know who is around him. But it's his responsibility to figure out what communication style works, not just for the team as a whole, but also for each person under his leadership. So for me, a true leader is one who has the responsibility of effective communication on their shoulders. Of course, in any relationship, friendship, partnership, working with colleagues, it takes two. Each person has to work on how to communicate. You may say, listen, my boss was an amazing leader, but I did a lot of work to figure out how to communicate with him or her. This is normal. Each person has to work to meet the individual they're with. But a leader is focused on learning the communication style that works for the team in front of them. They don't sit back and say, I'm in charge, so you figure out what I like, not vice versa. For me, that is not effective leadership. Empowerment and delegation. So in order to move towards a common goal, the team needs to be there to actually participate. If it's just the leader doing all the work, refusing to ask for help, refusing to give enough information to get real engagement from the team, I do not find this to be teamwork. This is, again, the image of the genius surrounded by assistants. You're here to help me get where I'm going. Whether or not you get there is irrelevant because I have my goal and you're here to send my emails and you're here to do my calendar, and I'm not really going to share information with you. I'm not actually going to give you any real tasks. I'm not going to empower you to grow your skill set and to participate more, right? An actual leader will do the opposite. We'll say, we as a company, let's imagine we are, let me think of a company I can use. Let's imagine we are, I almost said law firm, but I don't think I can do a good example for a law firm. Okay, let's pick a for-profit company. We're selling something. Reba. Why don't we be Reba? We're selling juice. Okay. So true leadership would be involving the team in bringing their opinions. Why are our sales numbers low this quarter? Sorry, I'm stuttering. Why are our sales numbers low this quarter? Asking the team. The leader doesn't have all the answers. All right, I'm going to empower my staff member to go out and do some research on the competition. Should we be doing a different pricing strategy? I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to share what I'm thinking about, and then still I make the final decisions. I'm the boss of Ruiba. I'm in charge of steering this ship, but I have everyone else here to help me towards the goal of increasing sales. Emotional intelligence. I think a lot of what you put in the chat connects to emotional intelligence, about awareness, about people skills. When we say people skills, which is a great terminology if you want to use this ever in English, let me just write this here. If you ever want to say people skills, it's like an overall term that refers to social skills. It means I'm good with people, I connect with them easily, I'm able to handle their emotions. When I communicate with them, it's well received. When they communicate with me, it's well received. So this, I think, touches very closely on emotional intelligence, understanding who's in the room with me, and really also what motivates them. All right, before we move on, we have a great quote in the chat. Thank you, Amar. Amar is saying, Steve Jobs said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. I love that quote. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on quickly to organizational leadership. So now we're going to go, in this class, what you'll see, sorry, a moment with my dog here who's just fussing around. Although for once you can't exactly hear her. We'll see if that lasts. Okay, excuse me. In this class on leadership, you'll notice that we sort of are doing two things. We're talking about leadership as a concept, I'm hoping to introduce to you some new vocabulary as we go through it, and also look at culturally what we consider a leader to be when we're in the English-speaking business environment. I'm not saying you're going to find better or worse leaders based on the language, but I'm trying to make sure we all have a similar baseline for these definitions as you move into working in English. Maybe you want to work abroad, maybe you want to go to research conferences. So that's the sort of goal of a business English course. And also, I want to introduce you to some new vocabulary. So we started off having this open discussion about leadership and what you think a good leader is, who inspires you. Now we're going to go actually a deep dive into some very specific vocabulary related to leadership structures in companies. And I promise we're going to come back out and talk again about leaders, because these things are connected. Companies are not, let's say, effective leaders need structure in order to lead well. It's not simply we're all in a room together and there's a person who's in charge and they bring all the magic. I'm a firm believer in systems, that a good leader creates effective systems to help guide people to where they need to be. I mean, when I say systems, it could be something like a seating arrangement in the office, figuring out where people sit. I gave an example earlier of a system around teamwork and communication, with a leader who says, I don't want to have any meetings in the middle of the day. It's ruining productivity. So a leader is not simply their own presence and their smart intellect. It's their ability to design a physical and abstract sort of system to guide their team. So an abstract system that we're going to talk about today are organizational charts. How do leaders organize their companies for effectiveness? Okay, so I was going to ask something in the chat, but I actually think I'm just going to move forward. My question originally was, what are organizational charts? Just to see if anyone here knew what they were. But I think I'll just go ahead and show you. The one thing I want you to see from this slide is the shorthand. So organizational charts, if you are ever working in an English-speaking company, it's very rare that they will say organizational chart. You will hear org chart. Has anyone seen the org chart? Or we've had a complete change of our structure. I need a new org chart. This is what an org chart looks like. I'm sure you've seen this, or if you've worked in a corporate or private sector company, you've probably seen this before. Most of them have it where, especially when you start in the job, you're new, you'll get this handed to you on your first day saying, this is the boss. These are the people the boss supervises, and these are the people that those people supervise, sort of a flow of responsibility. So yes, I see Waleed saying, is it a flow chart? Technically, we wouldn't call it a flow chart, I don't think, because a flow chart, when I use it, is about responsibility, like in a project management tool of a project, like one person does this, and when they do the data entry, the next person makes the call. So that's what I think of when I think of flow chart. But it is a chart where you are connecting different employees in a company to show who is in charge of who. Yes, the hierarchy. Exactly, the hierarchy. Organizational charts allow you to understand the hierarchy of a company. So especially in the United States, where it's people in a company act very informal. So maybe you're meeting the CEO and you might not know it because he or she may be completely relaxed and chill, and they want to talk to you, and it's your first day and you're the intern. And so it can sometimes be confusing, especially if you don't come from that culture, to see everybody acting like they're the same level. So the organizational chart will show you, no, in fact, you just met the CEO. That's not the same level as you. And that's considered a good thing in the US. We like a CEO or a manager who is what we would call down to earth. Have you heard this expression, down to earth? Can anyone send me a synonym? I put it in the chat. What's a synonym of down to earth? Someone who's down to earth. Modest, humble, great. Humble, yeah. Basically this, modest and humble. And I would add it's a little, it's a little bit more than humble in the sense of, oh, I don't brag about myself or I don't think I'm amazing. It's also someone who is not snobby. So if everyone is eating, let's say, garantita for lunch, like something that's not expensive, they also eat that for lunch. They don't need to have an expensive meal. So it means humble, but it also means it's not someone who's not snobby. They don't only need fancy things. They buy the same clothes as someone who makes less money as them. They go to the same types of restaurants. They eat the same types of food. That is down to earth. Like, even though they could be up here, because we know that, they're making a lot of money, like the head of Reba, we know that the boss of Reba is making a lot of money. It's a successful company. So then when you see, I think it's a him who's running it. So if you see him, eating garantita on a park bench, you'll say like, wow, he's really down to earth. Okay. So it's not just humble. It's also sort of simple in their habits or not snobby. And I think that this is very cultural. Some cultures love a leader who acts down to earth. And I come from one of those cultures. American, especially politicians, when they want to win votes, they wear blue jeans, they wear sneakers. They show, look, I'm like you. I'm just a normal American guy. That's considered really desirable. But I think a lot of other cultures, I'm thinking the first one that comes to mind for me is actually France, where they don't want a politician who looks like they're wearing blue jeans. They actually want a politician who they trust to be more formal or, someone at the who's not the average man. We don't want the average man in charge. We want the best man in charge. You should always be in your suit. You should always speak correctly. And if you make a mistake, there was one time, I think it was a French politician was riding a scooter, and it was the humiliation of France. Whereas in the US, the politicians are always trying to show, look, I'm just like you. Yeah, I'm on my scooter and I walk to work. I'm walking my dog. Like, this is the kind of thing that Americans love to see in their leaders. I'd be curious at the end of this if you can share with me what Algerians like to see in their leaders. And I don't mean just politicians. That was just my one example. Do you like to see a CEO who's down to earth? Or do you like to see a CEO who's, let's say, more refined? I think is a good opposite of down to earth, and while still being positive. Refined is someone who's very polite, who's very educated, a little bit fancy, a little bit formal. Okay. So organizational charts allow you to understand the hierarchy of the company. So now we're going to look at 3 different types of org charts. These are 3 different ways that people organize their companies. If anyone is here who's thinking of ever starting a company, and I am here as someone who started a company, I can tell you that this is really something you as a leader spend a lot of time thinking about. How do I organize my team? I have a question here. Could you repeat the opposite of down to earth? So here, the word I use is refined. Let me go back. So I see that, Yassine, you're saying the opposite is snobby. It's true that you could say both of these are opposite. The difference is the connotation. So down to earth is a positive connotation to someone who's acting extremely relaxed and simple. But we could have many negative words for that person as well. We could say that they look unrefined, that they look lazy, that they look messy. Like, there's negative words or positive words to describe this. So down to earth is a very positive way to talk about this. Someone who's the opposite, so someone who always wears a suit, who always wears heels, who always looks formal, who always uses very high level language. A negative connotation or a negative word for that could be snobby. Oh, they think they're better than me. He thinks he's way better than me because he's in his suit and he's speaking a really fancy dialect of, I don't know, of Arabic or of French or of English. And that's a really negative way to talk about that person. Maybe it's because they're behaving in a way that's not nice. But a positive way to say that same thing, someone who's formal, who's fancy, who's using a high elevated language, we could say refined. It means someone who's kind of Yeah, well educated and fancy or formal, but in a way that we appreciate, that we like, that we feel like shows us in a very positive light. Okay. So anyways, it's all to say that you can find different words, and it's important to know, is it a positive description or a negative one? So the positive description, because down to earth is a positive word. So the positive opposite is refined. Thank you for the question. Okay. Org charts. So there are three main types, because there's only so many ways you can organize your team. The first is the pyramid. This is super traditional org chart. So you have the CEO at the top, and then underneath the CEO, you have sort of the managers or people who just they oversee. So in this case, we have Ronald Richards. These are made up people. This is not a real company. Ronald Richards is the CEO. He oversees a data center support scientist and a computer and information research scientist and a systems designer. So clearly there's something going on here with data science, with computers, technology, apps, something in that field. So he has three people who report to him, three people who he supervises. One of those people, Wade Warren, is the person who's in charge of a team. So this person is in charge of a senior network engineer, an account executive, a system architect, and a senior network architect. The pyramid structure is clear because I think this is just what we expect. We expect that there's someone in charge who oversees a few people, who oversee a few people. Normal. What has been happening lately, especially since, I don't know, maybe the mid-2000s, is we're seeing a lot of companies experiment, saying, you know what, there's too much hierarchy. It creates so much paperwork because you have to do evaluations and everyone is, in charge of these teams of people. And it creates communication problems because the CEO can't talk to the assistant. She has to talk to first her person, who then talks to his person, who talks to her person, and then the assistant. Let's just keep it simple. Let's keep it where everyone is more or less equal. And so that's how you get to a flat or a horizontal org structure, org chart. So in this one, you just have one person, and he, in this case, Floyd Miles, is in charge of everybody. This is really classic of a new company or of a startup, which will have the founder and then a team of people who all report to the founder. It's really a good style in a situation of, I would say, not necessarily crisis, but pressure, high pressure, because everything goes through the CEO. There's no loss of information as it moves through a chain that is maybe quite complex. So if anyone has an issue, they all go to the same person. I think that's the main advantage of a flat org chart, is basically people feel like you can move faster because everyone has the ear of the CEO directly, and the CEO is really involved in everyone's work. You can kind of immediately see the downside of this, however, which is it will have a limit. How many people can the CEO successfully supervise, right? If you look at the last org chart, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. The CEO is individually only supervising 3. Now, in this other flat chart, the CEO is supervising 4. 7, if you got to 7, then all you're doing as the CEO, as the one in charge, all you're doing all day long is checking in on other people's work. 9, impossible. 10, 11, impossible. So this is really only going to work for some industries or some new companies where you can have really small teams. Then we have this new structure that is a little bit complicated to understand, and I'm not convinced it's all that different from the pyramid structure, but I'm presenting it to you anyways because it's currently it's very in. It's something that a lot of companies are claiming is a super successful structure, and who knows, maybe it's definitely more relevant for big companies. I don't have a big company, and so that's probably why it doesn't feel important yet for me. But in this structure, we're calling it matrix. So it's gonna take a little while. So I'm gonna walk through each person. It's a bit hard to understand. You have the CEO. In this example, we have Diana Stewart. Diana is supervising 4 people. Okay, so it looks normal, like it could be flat, it could be pyramid. We have the CEO supervising. Then we have other employees. So if you look, let's start with Jerome. Jerome Bell is a team manager. with Catherine Murphy and Diane Russell. Okay, so these are two people who report directly to Jerome, let's say for anything administrative, for anything HR, if they want to take vacation, Jerome is their boss. But then you also see Kyle Watson on the left is a project manager, managing Project One. Project One, now we're going to move horizontal. Project One has 3 people working in it. We have Catherine Murphy, Kristen Watson, and Simon Pena. So we actually now have a project boss. So Catherine Murphy has an administrative boss, who's Jerome Bell, but also a project boss, who's Kyle Watson. So the one who is going to fire her or promote her, that's Jerome. That's administrative. The one who she asked for vacation days, that's Jerome. But the person who is giving her feedback on the quality of her work, who is tasking, delegating work to her daily, is actually Kyle Watson. So she may end up having more experience with her project manager than her team manager. This works for big companies, big consulting companies where you have a lot of clients. So every client will need a specialist leader who knows the client. And maybe it doesn't make sense for that leader, that project leader, to also be administratively in charge of the staff. I'm curious, between pyramid, there it is, my question, between pyramid, horizontal, flat/horizontal, or matrix, what do you think is the most effective style and why? And I know I might have persuaded you by rolling my eyes a little bit at the matrix style, okay? Ignore my own bias. I'm not running Coca-Cola. And so it could be that when you get to that size, that's really the only one that makes sense. Tell me, pyramid, flat, or matrix, and then please tell me why. All right, we have matrix, pyramid, matrix. Okay, I'm waiting for my why. Tell me why. There's more communication in matrix. Very interesting observation, Yassine. Yeah, there's definitely more communication. I mean, there can be a real advantage to having 2 different bosses, so that if you don't get along with one boss, you have another voice, you have another leader who can mentor you. Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have more management in the structure. Okay, Tanina says, I think the matrix is better. Each leader is engaged in his tasks. Okay. Yassine says, even members are linked in the matrix, aren't they? In the matrix, I like it. We are in the matrix now. Let's see. Members are linked. So if you look at Project One, we have team member Catherine Murphy, team member Kristen Watson, team member Simon Pena. The linking between them is not hierarchical. So when you're on the same level, it means that they're on the same team, that they are coworkers, but it does not indicate anything about hierarchy. Okay, I think pyramid is the most useful because it's the most successful. Some people say if it's not broken, don't fix it. Just have a traditional structure where you have the boss, you have people who work for the boss, you have people who work for them. Iba says, I would go with the pyramid. The matrix seems a bit complicated for no reason. And also the pyramid one is more organized and straight to the point. Each one's job duty is clear. Okay, great. Nobody here likes the flat structure. Interesting. Flat structure is very in vogue, is very popular right now. Pyramid is the most useful. Oh, I read this one already. I'm with the matrix. It's simpler than the others. Mohammed Amin, I'm interested to hear why you think the matrix is the simplest. For me, the simplest is flat. I mean, maybe not simplest to manage, but it is certainly the easiest to understand. When you walk in the door, everybody has one boss. Okay. Sarah says the third one, so that's matrix because it's well organized. Amar says, I think actually some leaders try to use other methods and not follow these. Okay, tell me, let's see if you have some. Elon Musk said, communicate directly with everyone. Communication should travel via the shortest path necessary to get the job done, not through the chain of command. Any manager who attempts to enforce chain of command communication will soon find themselves working elsewhere. You know, I would suggest that leaders of companies who we think are total geniuses in terms of their knowledge. So Elon Musk, we think about AI, we think about renewable battery charged cars, we think about technical knowledge. But if you read quotes like this and quotes from other leaders, what you quickly come to realize is they spend most of their time thinking about how to improve the systems of a company. And these are lessons that you could apply to any company. And so what Elon Musk is voicing is the frustration of having good ideas get stuck because the person who has the idea doesn't have the authority to communicate with the person who needs to receive the idea. But I will push back because there is a negative to what he's suggesting as well, which is if everyone, well, let me say, I think it's a great thing that everyone can speak to everyone, meaning that there's not so much hierarchy that you feel like you don't have the right to approach someone in your company with an idea. This to me is too extreme, and you will lose good ideas this way. But there is also a risk where if everyone has access to everyone all the time, you may end up with so much communication and so many meetings and so many WhatsApp channels and Slack groups and just a lot of talking that it can be hard to get work done at the end of the day. So some of these org charts are also done to make work more efficient, not simply to make workers feel great all the time. I can't think of a nicer way to say it like that than that. Okay, Sarah said there's supervision in every team in the matrix. Waleed says that he has seen the flat org chart in a small company doing client services by phone. Okay, great. All right, so let's move forward. That is everything about org charts. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about this. Really might be something quite basic, but I wanted to list the titles in English of different roles and where they fall in the company. And the reason I'm doing this is because there are some false friends from French and from Arabic and from Spanish and from other languages where you might not be aware of which titles are considered what level of worker. So this will be really fast. We're just going to go over some vocabulary. So at the lowest level, we have the intern. And this I think everybody is aware of, but intern is a temporary worker. They don't have a permanent contract and they are there really to learn. It is often part of a university program where you are obliged to do 3-month, 6-month internship in a company related to your field. Assistant, again, these are general terms. So you can have a research assistant, an office assistant, an admin assistant, a finance assistant, but it is usually an entry-level worker, someone who's just getting started with you. Coordinator and associate, those are typically higher than assistant. But again, it depends on the company. Every company is slightly different. It's not a rule. It's not a rule that a coordinator is higher than an assistant. Maybe in some companies it's different, but typically associate and coordinator are a little bit higher, maybe 1 or 2 years experience. Then you have specialist and analyst. So these are when you're starting to reach mid-career. These are the types of titles that you will see. And I think in the pyramid org chart, we had technical specialist as one of our examples. Now we're going to look at mid-level to senior level. So supervisor, strategist, consultant, manager, obviously, director, and director. Yes, we have 5. So all of these are indicative of someone who is at the middle of their career, possibly a senior level in their career. It's important to note that when we say a mid-level of their career, we're not saying the middle of their career, because first of all, it's impossible to know how long someone's career will be. And also nowadays you can find people who are maybe they've only been working for 3 years and they're already a supervisor. It could be because they're in a fast growing industry, or maybe they're just a genius and are moving quickly. So mid-level is more of this. It's a description of where they would fall on the org chart than it is about them and their age. And last, we have what's often referred to as the management team or the managerial team. And this is just basically the people who are in charge. At the very top, once we are past director and manager, we're looking at CEO. CEO is Chief Executive Officer. This person is in charge essentially of strategy and external relations. So that's the face that is going to be associated with the company. That's the personality that will be associated with the company. For example, we all know who Elon Musk is, but probably his COO can go to dinner and not get recognized by anyone. So there's a kind of a public relations component to the CEO role, as well as this idea that their decision or their vision is driving the car, the vision of the CEO. Then we have CFO. The F is for financial. So this is the sort of one-stop shop for financial planning. So the individual who looks at the numbers, how are sales, how are costs, where is our profit, are we on track, and also everything related to reporting. Are we effectively reporting for taxes? Are we on time for submitting for an annual audit? There's a lot of financial management that goes into running a company, and the CFO, if a company has, of course, someone at all of these levels, the CFO is the one in charge. There's no rule that says you have to have a CFO. There's also no rule that says you have to have a CEO, but there is always someone playing the role of the CEO, even if they call themselves a manager or a director. So some people don't like the title CEO. They think it sounds grandiose and big, and like I'm being kind of snobby, or I'm acting like I run a 500-person company. So they say, no, I'm not the CEO. I'm just the manager. But if they are the person in charge, they will be doing the things the CEO does, which is representing the company, driving the car, which is my analogy for deciding the direction and having the vision. CFO, however, you don't find everywhere. Okay, the CFO is a role that you'll really only find in bigger companies. COO. Oh, I see something in the chat here. Record keeping. So record keeping, when we keep records, it basically means that we are saving our documents. So financial documents are usually pay sheets. So that's fiche de paie. I know I'm only speaking English tonight, but just to try to map what maybe you've seen in Algerian companies with the documents I'm talking about. Pay sheets, declarations like CNAS, CASNOS, all of these come with paper. So that these papers are called records, and they need to be saved because every year for some companies, or every few years for others, you can have an audit where someone from the government or from the tax authority will come and they want to check your documents and make sure that you are reporting your profits correctly, that you are declaring salaries. There's the oversight piece that goes into running companies. And so the CFO is the one who keeps records in case of these visits or to plan for these visits. Huaria Shaida, who asked the question, tell me if that made sense or not. So Walid is saying, what is a pay sheet? So a pay sheet is basically, what is the difference between a pay sheet and a payload? So I don't know what a payload is, unless I'm not remembering something obvious. So I'll tell you what a pay sheet is. A pay sheet is at the end of the month, every salaried worker, they get their salary, and they have a sheet, a document that shows them how much they were paid. It also tells what part of their salary goes to the government, because every country has taxes. Even if some countries have less taxes and some countries have a lot of taxes, some money that is supposed to go to the employee goes to the government. They put a tax on salary. So the pay sheet is the document that shows you how much of your salary went to taxes and how much is coming to you. Hussein is saying it's like a pay slip. Yes, pay sheet and pay slip are synonyms. Bill, as Ammar said, is not a synonym. A bill is what you give someone who owes you money. So we bill our clients. A pay sheet is something that all employees receive at the end of the month. Yassine is telling me a payload is cargo. Yeah, that doesn't sound like it's in the same world we're talking about right now with financial tracking. Thank you. Tell me, Mahdi, if that made any sense. So we have CEO, we have CFO, and then we have COO. So a COO, it's funny because I'm smiling because one time I heard someone pronounce COO as coup, because if you pronounce it as a word, it's coup. And coup in English, to coo, is the sound a pigeon makes. You know, they sit outside on your window and it's like, I'm going to try to make the noise. They go like, hurr, hurr. That noise is cooing. So it's a noise, it's a verb associated. Sometimes we say babies coo. It's a word we associate with animals or with small children. So make sure when you're saying any of these words that you don't actually say the acronym. Sometimes we will say, we say acronyms like ASAP. You can choose to say ASAP, or you can say ASAP, which is really pronouncing it like it's a word. These acronyms, you cannot pronounce like they're words. It doesn't work. I see Yassine saying coup has a political meaning. It does, but it's not spelled COO. The political meaning word is COUP, but the pronunciation is the same. So anyways, a COO manages daily operations. So we're talking about things like taking care of the physical space. If we need to order a new desk or more paper for the office, or the printer is out of ink, everything that goes into the operational features of the office. Maybe like tonight, the Wi-Fi being down. I'm not in the office, but managing connection, Wi-Fi, network would fall under the COO. Anything that has to do with sort of day-to-day operations. Great. And then we are coming at the last one on the slide here, which is a CTO. This is a newer term, and it is definitely not found in every industry because it's really specific to technology, the chief technology officer. So this is this position you will really find in companies that are operating in the tech field. Maybe Yassir has a chief technology officer. Meta, Facebook's parent company, I'm sure has a CTO. So this is someone who's really focused on the development of the actual tech that is at the heart of the company. The American Institute certainly does not have a CTO. What do you think? I'm going to come back to this, but I just want to ask a quick question. What do you think a C-suite is? It's maybe a little bit obvious, but I'm going to give you 30 seconds just so that you can't Google it. Does anyone know C-suite? I'm checking the clock to make sure I only give you 30 seconds, because if you Google it, you'll find it immediately. For Daos, yes, this will be on YouTube soon, I promise. I see nothing, so maybe folks aren't familiar with the term C-suite, which is what I'm hoping for, because I'm hoping you're getting new information from me. So I will tell you what we just looked at. CEO, CFO, COO, CTO is called the C-suite. It's abstract. So it's not an actual room. It's not a big office. It's this abstract concept. I'm putting it over my head for some reason, like something I'm thinking about, that just refers to management, really. So when people say, oh, management isn't happy with our sales numbers, management is changing the remote work policy. When they say management in a general term, we understand they're talking about the directors, the managers, the people who run the company and make decisions. The C-suite is exactly the same thing. It's a group of people running the company, but because we use the letter C, we know that we really are just talking about those who have this title, the chief title. Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer. They are the C-suite. All right. Okay, I had one more thing I wanted to say before we moved on. I just was so eager to show you C-suite. Okay, so we have these 4 titles in front of you. I explained to you that CTO is the most recent one and therefore the least common. And I also said that CEO is the most common. And in a company such as my own, I have chosen the title CEO because this is what we use in the US for someone who runs a company, is always the CEO. But I don't have a CFO, a COO, a CTO because we're a small company. It would feel silly to have that level of of hierarchy until the company reaches, I would say maybe above 50 people, then you would start to expect to see these titles. That was one thing I wanted to add. The other I wanted to add is that nowadays we're seeing, especially in the US, because the US doesn't have a lot of rigid rules. We like to create new things, to be creative, to stretch boundaries. You're seeing people create even more titles, and it's getting, in my opinion, a little bit silly. So we have Chief Impact Officer. I've started seeing this. CIO, Chief. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the drama around Prince Harry leaving the royal family. And this is not relevant for the course, except to say that when he moved to America, he got a job with Netflix, maybe, with a big American company. And the title that they gave him was Chief Impact Officer. And everyone sort of laughed because it felt like a fake title. Like, what do you do? The idea is that it would be related to nonprofit work. I'm not sure what came of it, but when I hear this one, I always think of the Prince Harry story. I've heard Chief People Officer. So really someone who's in charge of human resources. But it just sounds very odd to say Chief People Officer. And then a lot of times in LinkedIn, you'll see updates from people who they'll say, I'm not a CEO, I'm a CHO, Chief Happiness Officer, or Chief Human Officer. Okay, so it's like people are starting to play with this terminology and adjust it and change our opinion of it. So it'll be interesting to see in 5 or 10 years from now if they have the same associations that they have today. Amar has a question. These terms are for big companies. Can we have the same for small companies? So any size company can have a CEO because the CEO is a little bit like the director. So the person in charge can decide if they want to be CEO, if they want to be director, president. That's another one. You can choose to be president. So as the person in charge, you choose. You get to pick your own title. And so you can choose CEO or not. After that, if you only have 1 to 5 people, it feels a little bit silly to use these titles. You know, if it's a 5-person company and you have a CEO and a COO, it starts to feel like, okay, is everyone in the company a chief of something? Right? The point of having these titles is it means that the company is big enough that they need a big boss of their department, because the CEO is the big boss of the operations team. The CFO is the big boss of the finance team. You only need a big boss if you have a lot of employees working under you. Otherwise, you can just report to the CEO. You can just report to the president. So the question is yes for CEO and no for the others. All right. What are some situations you can think of? Moving back to leaders, we finished kind of the big vocab section of the evening with org charts and job titles. When are situations you can think of when companies need good leaders? When do we need them the most? Yes, you could say, Ariella, give me a time we don't need good leaders. But tell me the scenarios you can think of when good leadership makes a difference. When they want to last in the long term, when investing in a project all the time. Yep, I knew that answer was coming. Crises, hard times. Okay. If there's an economic crisis, like the one of 2008, great. Any other ideas before I show you problems? Yeah. I agree with all of these. The first one is crisis management. Absolutely. Leadership tends to take on a special responsibility when we're faced with a crisis, because it's in these moments that we truly turn, we break our routines and we turn to the leader. What do we do? Tell me what to do. These are what we think of or what I think of, at least when I think of a crisis, when I was making this presentation, I thought, okay, crisis, but what counts as a crisis? Because not everything is an earthquake or, something outside of the control, something like a tornado, natural disaster, fire. The first kind of classic example of a company crisis is public relations problems. So negative media attention, for example, where the company goes into what's called as crisis mode. And the company will put out a lot of media articles, will invite journalists, will try to do many things to change their image. And from the outside world, when we watch a company go through a really negative PR moment, it's very interesting to see their strategy because it gives us an opportunity to judge their leader. I'm thinking recently about Starbucks. Starbucks is the American coffee franchise, and there was a big protest movement to boycott Starbucks over the war in Gaza. And the leader in charge in the beginning was very dismissive and didn't address it. And then I think 3 or 4 months in, released a statement saying, we're apolitical, there's been a misunderstanding. So this is when we watch leaders respond to crisis, we also get, as outsiders, it's like we're in the movie theater. We get a front row seat to observing their leadership style. Then you have more internal situations that the employees get a chance to see their leader in a crisis. So layoffs, this is what we call when a company has to fire people, usually because they have budget cuts. They don't have enough money, so they have to let people go. Bonus question, let me type it so you can also see it. What is the difference between layoffs and firing? Both of these happen, or both of these mean that the company is releasing employees from a contract. So why do we have different terms? What is the difference? Okay, Yassine is guessing, is it compensation related? There will probably be a difference in compensation. Good. Anything else? Okay, Tanina is saying, are layoffs just to suspend? I'm not sure. Anyone else? Firing is definitive. Okay. Don't hesitate to guess. Shoot me your best guess. I'll tell you at the end. I want to see your ideas. Maybe because the reason behind it is different. Okay. Layoffs for difficulties, firing for suspension. Firing is usually after an employee makes a mistake. Firing is the worker's problem, but layoffs are the company's problem. That's an interesting way of putting it. I don't disagree, actually. All right, I'll wait for one more and then I'll tell you. Maybe this was the last one. Okay, so layoffs are done in response to a problem at the company level. So that's why I liked what Sushi, our wonderful student Sushi, put in the chat, which is we do layoffs, not we, like I'm in the C-suite. A leadership team does layoffs usually to make more money. So they'll say, hey, listen, we hired too many people. We don't need them. We're spending too much money on salaries. So we don't fire, we lay off a big group of people. And Yassine is correct in saying compensation. Usually when you are laid off, you're offered compensation. So they'll say, listen, you're losing your job, but we'll pay for 2 months' salary. Okay. And so they have sort of an offer for you, like a sad present, because it's a sad day to be laid off, but it almost always comes with, we call it a package, a compensation package or a termination package. Like, in the US, at least, your health insurance is connected to your company. So they'll say, we'll pay your health insurance for another month while you look for a job. Yeah, so Tanina is saying it's a polite way to fire someone. It's more polite. I think it feels pretty rough, but it's definitely more polite than firing, because firing is in response usually to either poor performance of an employee or just a really bad relationship between the employee and the company. And so getting fired, you're not getting any little package. You're not getting the 2 months compensation. I mean, in most cases, I suppose in bigger companies, maybe they still offer some benefits, but typically getting fired is you have done something wrong. You show up at work, your computer is removed, your email address is deactivated, and it's considered much rougher, like more emotional. During layoffs, the person firing you is never angry or upset with you. It's always an apology. Unfortunately, we've had to make some tough decisions, like this kind of speech. Firing is usually, you've been an underperformer and it's not working and we're not happy to have you on the team. So it can provoke way more conflict, because getting fired, it can, you feel at times very criticized or very insulted. When you're laid off, again, you might feel criticized simply because, why am I laid off and this guy isn't laid off? But the conversation is rarely about performance. So that's the main difference. I mean, as I hear myself giving the difference, I can think of exceptions like, oh, but there was a story about this layoff where people were yelling, or, oh, there was a story about this firing where actually they all got compensation packages. So the differences I'm telling you are not definitional differences. It's cultural. Culturally, we use firing more for something, a termination that's considered uglier, and layoffs is for a termination that's considered less ugly. So use it as a sort of broad cultural difference. And when you read stories about layoffs, you'll understand that that's kind of a more forgiving angle towards a company. Okay, crisis management can also be about changes in leadership. So when the CEO quits or is fired, or internal conflict. So if employees are not getting along, or if employees and leadership are not getting along. And then I liked what everyone said. Let me remind you what question we're answering. We're answering, when do companies need good leaders? So all of these other things are basically routine tasks. So those who said all the time they need good leaders, great. I was really thinking about moments when leadership communication is important. So that's why I put these specific times on the slide. So updates, routine coordination, really making sure that the flow of dialogue and conversation is moving between team members, inspiration and motivation, and then delegation and communicating instructions. So really, the leader is responsible for the flow of information and for making sure that team members are able to work together effectively towards a shared goal. Great. Let's see what we have time for, because I see that we have, since we started late, I'm going to take us late. I'm seeing that we have 15 minutes left. Let's address some of these questions. I'm really curious to know what you think about this one. Can a leader be an introvert? Can a leader be an introvert? For those who are less familiar, an introvert is someone who's not very social, or they find themselves very tired after interacting with people. So maybe they spend more time alone than an extrovert who is really loving to be around people all the time. There's no right answer. I really just want to know your thoughts. Can a leader be an introvert? Why and why not? Yes, if he has good social skills. Yeah, being an introvert doesn't mean you have bad social skills. It just means you prefer to socialize less. Okay, why not? If he can do the job and have potential. No, because he needs to communicate. He doesn't have the ability to communicate with people. Yes, I think so. Only if he can still communicate with his team members and he has vision. Only in small companies, but a big company requires an extrovert. Any other thoughts? Well, the reason I asked this question is because there have been some really good articles lately about quiet leadership. And it's a term that is talking about that introvert leader, saying leadership is not simply about being the funniest guy in the room, the biggest voice, the biggest personality, the last one to leave the party. You can be someone who really inspires, and this is my opinion as well. This is not fact, this is opinion, that you can really inspire your team without needing to love these big social engagements. In fact, sometimes someone who's quieter or who's more introverted might be more insightful. They may spend more time observing and seeing, oh, these team members are having trouble working together. And I know that because I'm being quiet and I'm watching and I'm observing. Whereas an extrovert may be less observant because they're spending more time in engagement mode, in pumping up mode, in motivation mode, but doesn't actually have as much information to work with than the introverted one. So for me, I think an introvert can be a leader, but they will be a different kind of leader than an extrovert. That's for sure. And perhaps there are some companies where it will be more or less helpful to have an introverted leader. We have Abdul Qadir's answer here. A leader can definitely be an introvert. Leadership is not limited to extroverted qualities, and introverts can possess several strengths that make them effective leaders. Great. They say that the leader is the one that doesn't talk a lot in a group of people. He says what's necessary. I think if we put our minds to it, we could probably right now generate some introverted leaders. I'm trying to think, it's hard because politicians in general, they do so much public engagement that I can't think of any politicians who are introverts. But leaders, what about sports leaders? There are, I think, many who are amazing at their craft, but maybe they're not the most social people. In fact, the fact that they weren't social is probably the reason they spent so much time working on their game. I don't know. Do you have any famous football players or basketball players who are not known for being extroverted? I'm thinking also of Queen Elizabeth, who passed away. I'm not a big royal family follower. I don't know. Now I've mentioned Prince Harry and Queen Elizabeth, but they're on my mind, I suppose. And she was not very extroverted. She did her business. She read her speeches, but she was a family woman. I would guess she was an introvert, definitely. We have Khabib, an MMA champion. Okay, Zidane, Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, I think Mark Zuckerberg probably is an introvert. You see him sometimes looking quite uncomfortable speaking to a group. Okay, well, something to think about. If you think of other people, send them in the chat. I would love to see who you think of. All right, what is the difference between a boss and a leader? One of you brought this up earlier and I said, yes, we will be talking about this. Tell me what's different between a boss and a leader. Anything come to mind when we say that? Boss versus leader. Any thoughts? Yassine says boss is bossy. Well, there we go. Boss is bossy, meaning demanding. Bosses give orders. Leaders lead the way. A boss has the power, but is not necessarily the leader. Boss is more harsh. Any other ideas? A boss manages employees. The other ones, okay, boss manages employees, leaders influence. Okay, the difference between manage and influence, interesting. A leader communicates. A leader is communicative and understanding. A boss can be a leader, but a leader is not always a boss. Interesting. The boss needs the leader to get the goals of the company. Okay. All right, great. I want to show you a chart to keep us thinking. So we have here two images. You might have seen these images before because it's not, they're common. This is a common dynamic or a common question. Is the person in charge just because they're in charge? Does that mean that they are a good leader? And I think the consensus is no. Leadership is not just about having the authority or having the power. It's what you do with that power. It's what you do with that authority. So I've seen a few different images, but this one stood out to me the most of sort of visual representation of what that means. So on the left side, you have the boss, and the boss is sitting on what the employees are carrying and has a whip. It's actually quite a violent image, and they are not contributing to the work, but they're yelling at everyone about what they want them to do. Not only are they not contributing, but they're making it harder. So this image is pretty negative about the boss. I've seen others where the boss is simply in the back, like what we talked about earlier, instead of being in the front. But here the The boss is not helping and is actually hurting the effort. Then on the right, you have leader, and leader is helping, is in front, and is carrying the load with the employees together. So I'm just going to read out the comparisons that they have. A boss drives employees. Drives is something we can say as well with a whip. It's a term for when we had coachmen who would drive coaches. So that's driving them to work, is whipping them, getting them to move forward. So a boss drives employees versus a leader who coaches employees. A boss commands, a leader asks. A boss generates fear, a leader inspires enthusiasm. A boss relies on authority, a leader relies on goodwill, meaning goodwill is when people feel like they want to help you because they care about you or they care about the mission. It's not because they are forced to. They're not obliged to help you. They want to help you. A boss uses people. A leader develops people. A boss says I. A leader says we. A boss knows how it should be done. A leader shows how it should be done. A boss blames. A leader repairs. A boss undermines. A leader empowers. A boss says, go, ordering you. A leader says, let's go. Let's go together. So I had some audio that I wanted to do tonight and invite you to share stories about bosses who were good leaders, bosses who were bad leaders. I think I'll stick this into next week's class because I want to give some time to hear those stories. So if you want to think about this between now and next Wednesday, I'd love to share some stories about what made your boss a good leader or what made your boss a bad leader. And instead for tonight, I want to just end on strategies to grow our own leadership skills. I think most of us are interested in becoming better leaders. I know I certainly am. And it's not something that happens passively. There are active steps that we take to develop our own leadership skills. And here are some of the strategies I've written down. So first, if you want to become a better leader, you have to take responsibility for understanding yourself. What are some of the characteristics you have that make you already a good leader? And what are some characteristics that you need to work on? So maybe you are a great team player. You're great at getting along with other people, but you're not very comfortable directing them, making decisions, having that authority role. So you say, okay, my people skills are really good, but I need to get more comfortable taking charge. If I want to be a leader, it's not a requirement that you are a leader. Every leader needs people who work with them. So there's no special extra value on the leader. The leader is only as good as their team. I don't want you walking out of here thinking like, I have to become a leader. I have to develop leadership skills. But if it's something you want, the very first place you have to start is with yourself. It's not something you can simply Google and say, okay, I need to develop these skills. You first need to do an internal, very honest accounting of what are the skills I have and what are the skills I need. Once you have done that, it's about setting goals. Okay, so I want to be comfortable being more assertive and making decisions and communicating decisions. Once you know what you need to work on, really it's up to you again to seek training opportunities or mentorship opportunities. The desire to develop a skill is not enough. We actually have to learn more about it. So you can look for training opportunities, let's say online through webinars like this, through free websites that do online courses like Coursera. And then mentorship is one of the most powerful ways that you can develop your skills. Look for someone in your vicinity whose leadership you appreciate and admire. See if you can ask them questions. See if they'll help you understand how did they become a good leader? What are the experiences that they went through that helped them grow their skill set? I can promise you that what they will tell you is to put yourself in positions of leadership early so that you learn as you go. Be the person who's in charge of the class project or who becomes the delegate. Put yourself in, I don't know, the friend group who organizes the activity. It doesn't have to be professional for you to practice your leadership skills. Next, it's really going to be about teamwork. A good leader is someone who is focused on the people around him or her. So teamwork skills, figuring out if you're not someone who naturally works well in a team, that is really important for you to work on. What skills do you need to develop so that you can lift your team while you lead? And then lastly, track progress. So once you've set your goals in the beginning, make sure that you have a way to see if you're reaching those goals. If we don't set, what is it called? It's metrics. Metrics. This is a way to measure progress. Sometimes we won't even realize it. We won't realize that we're developing. We'll miss it. And only when we look back 5 years later do we see, hey, that experience that I did taught me a lot of leadership skills. So it will help you become a better leader if you develop the ability to observe and reflect as you grow in your journey. Next week is about negotiations and conflicts. We will start with a little bit about leadership just because I'm interested to hear those answers, but otherwise we're going into negotiations and conflict next Wednesday at 6:30. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and I wish you a good rest of your evening.